Hello, howdy, hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever other salutation there might be for a different time of the day. It's This Week in WordPress, episode number 245. Thank you for joining us. Before we begin, I think it's important to say go and share. Go and share this thing. It is probably the best way to do that is to go to wpbuilds.com/live, then do the old Command C. Control C, paste it into your Twitter feed or Facebook feed or whatever it is that you might like to do. Get your mates, your colleagues, your parents, your cat. We'll talk about cats later. Drag them in and, swell the congregation. And hopefully we'll have a nice episode today. It's really nice to have three guests with us today. Welcome, first of all, to our regular co-host, Michelle Frechette. How you doing, Michelle?
I'm good, thank you.
I'm very, very good. It's just occurred to me that all of our little captions have gone. I'm going to quickly fix that. I'm going to go like that, and hopefully
There we are.
all of our little captions appear. Rob, if you want to change your caption, you can do that by go. Oh, and also Kristen, if you want to add a little bit of where you're from and what have you, if you go to your picture on the left, you can click the three little dots and update it if you wish to do that. How are you? Sorry, Michelle, say that again. I think you said you were good.
I am good, and I asked how you are.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm doing well. Michelle Frechette, here we go. We have a slightly updated bio. Michelle is the Director of Community Engagement for Stellar WP at Liquid Web, and she has been called the busiest woman in WordPress by Matt Mullenweg at WordCamp US 2022. I can vouch for it. I was there. It was true. In addition to her work at Stellar WP, Michelle does a whole bunch of stuff, and you can see all of that at meetmichelle.online. You've cut that bio right down, haven't you?
I really did, yes.
Yeah. And actually, we're going to be talking about something in a few minutes that I didn't know you were involved in, which is yet another thing which we could have added to the bio. Anyway, thank you so much for joining.
Always.
Yeah, and also we're joined by Kristen Wright. How are you doing, Kristen?
Hey, I'm doing well, thank you.
Yeah, great to have you with us. Kristen has been working in the WordPress industry for over 12 years. Now she gets to share her passion for journaling by doing marketing for the Day One Journal app, which actually is owned by Automatic, if you didn't know. She's the author of 3 books on journaling, including her most recent, The Transformation Year, a year of daily journaling prompts, and which is now out in paperback and hardcover. I've always wanted to write a book. I really, really do want to write a book one day, but I get about 3 pages in and think nobody's going to read this. But yeah, maybe you.
I have that book actually, the most recent one.
Very nice.
It's in my other office, though. Otherwise, I would hold it up and show you.
Yeah, well, maybe Kristen at some point can run off and find a copy and hold it up, and yeah, that'd be good. And finally, joined by Rob Howard. How you doing, Rob?
I'm very good. How about you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really good. You're very welcome. Rob, if you don't know Rob is the publisher at Master WP, which is a leading WordPress and tech magazine. Honestly, go check it out. There's a lot of content there every single week. He's also the CEO of HDC, the digital agency that's leading the industry to a better future. His team also just launched Every-Alt. We'll get to that. You can see what that is. An AI-powered tool that instantly generates accurate alternative text for images on your WordPress site. Yeah, we'll have a bit of a dive into how that works and how all of that works, but it's an absolute pleasure to have all of you with us. We're going to be here for about 90 minutes. If you want to drop a comment in, please feel free to do that. If you go to wpbuilds.com/live, you need to be logged into a Google account because we've pasted in the YouTube comments there. That's all well and good. On the other hand, if you go to our Facebook group, then you'll need to go through one additional step, which is to go to chat.restream.io /FB, chat.restream.io /FB. It just enables you to not be anonymous. You may want to be anonymous, but, maybe not. So let's say hello to a few people who've joined us. Happy Monday, says Rob Cairns. Good morning. Hi there, Rob. How are you doing? We've got a nice wave from Courtney Robertson. Thank you. We've got the kitchen sink WordPress. I can never remember who this is. Who is this?
It's Adam Silver.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. I can always forget. It says Happy Monday from NC. It says Alex. Yeah, very good. Last week, was it the week before? I got his name wrong 100% of the time. So I'm going to call him Ryan today, I think, or something like that. And here we go. Every week, Peter Ingersoll drops in a weather report. And today, greetings from Connecticut. It's 2 degrees centigrade, 36 degrees Fahrenheit, and rising. I like rising in weather. Temperatures are warming this week, so spring is in the air. Yeah, we've got about 14 degrees centigrade here, which for this time of year where I live, Peter, is pretty darn good. And look, we've got Ryan coming back with it's 34 degrees here. Was 27 during my morning run. If it's 34 degrees, if you use proper degrees, you're all basically dead. You're sitting there sweating. I don't understand Fahrenheit. Nomad Skateboarding says likes day one an awful lot. That's good to hear. We'll find out more about it later. And then we've got Ryan, who's claiming to be Adam. I don't know what that's all about. Let's get on with the WordPressy stuff, shall we? That's what we're here for. About 80 minutes of WordPress stuff. So here we go. Firstly, a couple of bits of promotion. This is our WordPress website, wpbuilds.com. If you fancy going there and subscribing to our list, you can just fill out this little form here. And we'll keep you up to date when we produce new bits of content, typically twice a week. You'll notice on the top here, we had a little plugin demo with my good friend, Mark Westgard. He's the developer behind WS Form. Honestly, if you've got a WordPress form plugin and you've been using it for years, please go and have a look. I'm not saying you're going to change, but it is genuinely worth a look. And if you fancy winning it, we've got this page here. You can link to that from the thing here. Just click on that image there, and you can win it. He's giving away 2 licenses, and you just have to tell us why you want to win it. We've already had some fairly funny ones because I've said you can say whatever you like. In less than 200 words, tell us why you want to win this license. This is the only criteria that will allow you to win it. Could be funny, profound, philanthropic, whatever you like. And we've had some funny ones already. And so go to that page and you can win it. Why not? Give it a go. Right. WordPressy stuff. WP Campus have got a blog post out this week. It's called Introducing WP Campus Inaugural Board of Directors. Now, correct me because I don't really know a great deal about WP Campus, but WP Campus's board of directors consisted of one person, Rachel Cherry, until now. And now they've got this great big, great and the good list of people who are on the board of directors. WP Campus, I think, is a WordPress institution, let's just call it that, which is trying to figure out how WordPress can be used in the education space. And
supporting.
Yeah, thank you. And up until recently, Rachel was the singular director, and she decided to step down. And so the news here is basically a load of people have decided this project is worth pursuing. So we've got David Dashifen, we've got Reed Piernock, Kira Howe. Rachel Cherry is staying on for now. My understanding is that's not going to be a long-term relationship. L. Danielle Baldwin, Ed Beck, Phil Crum, Eric Scott Sembrat, PhD. And if you want to be involved in this project, your voice counts. You can attend the board meetings and there's lists on there. Honestly, this is a really strong board. I don't know what your relationship, Michelle, it sounds like you know a bit more than I do. You got any thoughts on this?
I'm excited for it because when you have an organization with a director and not a board, you end up with burnout very quickly for your director. And should anything happen to that person, it's very likely that the entire organization will fall apart. So they were very, very thoughtful in how they did a call for nominees. This has been something that wasn't done overnight. They've spent plenty of time really developing their bylaws and how this is all going to work. And so I'm just real excited for them that they've put something together that's going to be able to be sustained in a long-term way. Rachel's done an amazing job, and I think she will still continue to be involved in some way, shape, or form, even when she's not part of the board of directors. But she's done an amazing job getting it to this point, and I think this is a next natural step in order for it to be sustainable over time. I know they took a hit a little bit. One of the things they do is they have a big event every year, WP Campus event, and of course, nothing's happened over the last few years because of COVID. But this year, they're actually coming back. They're having their event. I think it's in July in New Orleans, in Louisiana.
Thank you. What about Rob or Kristen? Got anything on this?
I always love to see honest and transparent and straightforward governance in any organization. I think that they're doing a really nice job leading by example with this. In the WordPress space, there is often a weird and sometimes opaque mix of for-profit and nonprofit, of organizations that actually have public decision-making and organizations that don't. So it seems like they really went out of their way to create a sustainable, public, transparent system. The things that this organization does can actually change and be decided by a majority of these new directors on the board. And I think that that is really a great model, especially for the nonprofit and open source space, really taking the time to establish the rules and then following them. And also the initial creator giving up some of that power to the group is really cool. A step in the right direction, I think.
I didn't really dwell on the actual bios. I just mentioned the names, but honestly, I would encourage you to go and look and read the bios of each of the different people, because it's a pretty cool team they've got together. We've got a developer who works at Georgetown University. We've got a few front-end developers, several of whom have got multiple decades of experience. Somebody that's been working in development and design for 20 years, somebody who's been working in the educational technology field for just about a decade. We've got the marketing and growth president from TenOp, somebody that works for the College of Engineering at Georgia Institute of Technology. It's just round, isn't it? There's just so much interest there. It's not just going to be one voice. So yeah, go and have a look at the page.
You may recall also that WP Campus was a huge impetus a few years back around accessibility for the dashboard side of things, the back end of WordPress, raising over $20,000 to do a proper evaluation.
That was them, wasn't it? I remember.
That was them.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, very good.
So they've done a lot of good in WordPress, not just for higher education, but for WordPress at large.
Kristen, anything on this before we move on?
Yeah, I'll admit this was an organization I hadn't actually heard of until this news item came up. And so it was really cool to see this organization exist. Kind of in some of my past WordPress experience, it was always really interesting to see, colleges, like well-known colleges using WordPress, and some of the email addresses that would come through for premium purchases. So just really cool that they're being supported with this organization.
I guess there's some piece whereby colleges and institutions like that, I don't really know how the financing works over your side of the pond, but I think that universities and places like that in the UK are much more strapped for cash, shall we say, than they might be over your side, because we have real strict limits on the amount of fees that they can charge. And whilst the fees, they're not nothing, they probably don't add up to a great deal of profit for the university. And so having somewhere to turn, somewhere where you can deploy somebody on your staff, and that person might not have a great deal of experience with WordPress, but they can go and look at all of the different bits and pieces, go and get support from that community. Yeah, it seems like a really amazing endeavor. I shall move on if that's what everybody has to say about that, and say, crikey, this has been a long time coming. WordPress 6.2 is very, 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 very close to being released, like a matter of days. And the final release candidate, one would imagine, release candidate 2 is out. If you've never tested a release candidate version of WordPress, it's really easy to do. I mean, you can be more complicated, but honestly, if you just go to download something like local and get it running and on your Mac or your PC or whatever it may be, and then go and install the WordPress beta tester plugin. That's all you need. And then you click a couple of boxes, bleeding edge and BCRC only. It'll get you there within about 10 seconds. And then you can go and check it all out. And there's a whole load of different bits and pieces. In fact, here we go. Milana Cap has a field guide. I'm just going to scroll it reasonably quickly, right? This is the WordPress 6.2 field guide from Milana. I'm not going to get into it, but there is actually a ton. Each of these little boxes is a link where you can go onto and make .wordpress article and read about it. But there is so much amazing stuff happening in 6.2. I don't know if you three, I'm imagining Rob being the in charge of a team, might be following this more closely than any of the rest of us. But Rob, I'm just going to pass it over to you. Is there anything in 6.2 from your team's point of view which you're keen to have in core, make use of, get using?
Yes, it's a big release.
Yeah.
We've done like articles, we have a podcast coming out in a week or two talking about it. So there's actually a lot to dig into. My understanding is, maybe I'm wrong about the exact moment that this is happening, but basically, we're at a place now where site editing phase 2 of the Gutenberg project is sort of going out into the wild. We're not calling it beta anymore. It's becoming like kind of its own real live thing, even more so than it was in the past. So we're excited about that. Our team has been getting more into the block editor and site editing. We are using it for some of our smaller sites, some of our like personal sites, specifically around like a complete block theme as opposed to
right, nice.
a classic or hybrid theme, right? So seeing that progress is really cool. As an old-fashioned coder, I also like that I'm going to be able to customize with CSS a little bit more on the fly. We were talking about how we love all the build tools and all the like really intense stuff, but I also like being able to hotfix things in 30 seconds. And, as much as it's unfashionable to like use Customizer for that, it kind of went away for a little bit, and now it's coming back in a slightly like more integrated way with all the other like block editor and site editing stuff. So that's kind of my 2000, the thing that I like that that harkens back to like 2010 as opposed to 2023, but always a good thing. And I think, there's a ton going on. It's going to be a big release. It doesn't seem like one of those releases that's going to be really like shocking or break a lot of stuff for existing clients, which I really like, but it's bringing in a lot of new improvements and really just kind of like taking the next big step forward on the roadmap.
Yeah, we had a comment just drop in from Max. Thank you for joining us, Max. He says, hasn't the navigation been removed again? So the block is still there. Oh, in fact, Nomad Skateboarding is taking it on. It has been removed from the site editor side panel. So there was this side panel which had templates and template parts and navigation in it, and it's been removed from there, which is I don't quite know what the story was. Do any of you three maybe know?
Yeah, there was a video on
WordPress.org
about it. We can try to dig it up, but I think what this speaks to is that there's this goal of completing site editing, and like that is probably a little bit overly ambitious in some ways. Like I appreciate that we're shipping it and putting it out to the world. But particularly around some of the navigation, components, there is just a lot of messiness over the last like 6 to 12 months. And I think what I read in the notes was basically like, we know we've gone back and forth in this a couple times. Like we may go back and forth again, but like we think that we're in the right place right now based on user feedback. So it's kind of that, constant evolution of the software. And, in theory, that's a good thing, but in practice, it can be a little bit confusing for people who are getting used to one way, in 6.0 or 6.1, and then it changes back and forth a couple times. But there was a lot of confusion around some of those navigation blocks and components over the last like 6 to 12 months. So I think they're doing their best to clear that up and just, make some decisions around what it really should be, because in some ways they're inventing a new interface or series of interfaces, and there's no real right answer to some of these questions. So I think the team's doing their best to kind of get it working, and also like put somewhat of a punctuation mark on it and say like, this is the thing we built. We're now shipping it. We're going to move some of our priorities over to like collaborative editing and these other big ideas. And then the future for the site editing tool is going to be more slow iterative improvements as opposed to like lots of big releases. At least that's my understanding of the plan.
It especially feels to me like the navigation piece is still not quite as well. Put it this way, a whole bunch of commercially available themes delivered a lot of more interesting stuff, should we say, in terms of navigation. What's shipping with WordPress 6.2 works. but you are fairly limited. But the bolts, the architecture underlying that, is now available for everybody to build their cool plugin on top of, to make that whole navigation piece a little bit more interesting and easy to use. So the piece that we had on the screen is, like I said, Milana Cap's piece, and it's very technical. And Michelle kindly has dropped in a link from Rob's site, Master WP. It's Nyasha Green who's written kind of like you described it as a field guide to the field guide, didn't you, Michelle?
I did, yes.
So if you can't wade your way through this, which is I guess there's a lot of technicalities there, and you've got functions being described and all that kind of stuff. You've got what I'm guessing, I haven't read this one, but I'm guessing is a fairly simplified version of that in easy to use language. That's great.
One other thing I'll add is that we run an agency, so we're building a lot of WordPress sites. We have a framework that we own that's Bootstrap and underscores based, but we're really just sort of psychologically starting to switch over to embracing more of the block mentality and the Gutenberg mentality. It's been several years. We've been very cautious about it, but we are sort of, essentially taking the team's word for like, okay, this is the real release. Like, we're going forward with this. It's not going to, change or shift gears dramatically for the next few years. So, we're now starting to incorporate that more and more on the client side. Whereas if you had asked me a year or two ago, I would have been like, I'm not touching that, for a while, because it's so volatile, right? So from an agency standpoint, I think we're at a place now where, not to say that there won't be changes, but I think the extreme volatility in the software is sort of a thing of the past, and it makes sense for a WordPress developer to start to embrace some of the new, theme.json and block features that have been sort of floating around for a couple of years. But at least I personally have been quite cautious about going too far in on something that wasn't like fully baked, especially because we had reasonable alternatives. But it's gotten a lot better in the last year. Not to say it won't improve or need improvements in the future, but we're at a place now where we're comfortable, like starting to train our staff on this, as opposed to some of the like other methods that are out there.
Gotta say, Rob, I do love these graphics. These little.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, they always look like you've had somebody sit down with an easel and some watercolors. They're just really nice. I'm just going to quickly go to the homepage because look, there's just one after another. Look at them.
The
They're
aesthetic
great.
was one of our favorite things about the brand. So we actually bought the brand from the two founders about a little over a year ago. And one of our favorite things was like, it just doesn't look like every other newsletter. It doesn't look like every other, theme or Substack or whatever. So we've really tried to like carry that forward.
Yeah, they're nice. I mean, if you go to any archive, you'll see there's just like dozens and dozens of them. Do you have these commissioned on a blog on a per post basis, or?
We used to use a service, and the previous owners used like a design service. So at this point, we've got it sort of streamlined enough that like it's basically a background plus a watercolor, right? So we're just doing them, on a case-by-case basis, either the writers or the editors. But yeah, there was a time when they were using like one of those sort of design everything for me for an unlimited price services. And they were saying, okay, we need a watercolor of like the WordPress logo with clouds. We need a watercolor of a chart going up, stuff like that. But I will share another secret is that we also reuse them because a lot of articles can have the same WordPress and cloud logo. So it looks beautiful as long as you don't reuse the same one on every article.
Leave it for 6 months and
exactly. So a lot of them are generic enough that we don't have to design a new thing.
They look really nice though. They look really, really nice. Anyway, so on this piece, just quickly, you can go to Milana's WordPress 6.2 field guide. That seems to be the more technical write-up. And if you want the much more straightforward, easy to read version, go to the Master WP. Michelle and Kristen, I realized we didn't give you a chance to comment on that. I don't know if you've got anything about 6.2 that you want to speak to particularly. If not, we'll move on.
Yeah, one thing I think is really cool is the style book. I saw a demo of this, and it's really cool, especially, you know, if you're trying to develop a style guide or something like that for clients. Really excited to kind of dig into this a little bit more, but I saw a demo of it and thought like, wow, that is really cool. So, and there's some global styles and copying and pasting of styles I thought, you know, is really useful and helpful. But style book, just being able to see like how all blocks output across a theme, and then also being able to make global style changes, I think is going to be really useful. Maybe, I don't know as much for end users, but probably people who are building sites and kind of managing things. So
Yeah, I'm trying to find a decent image of the style book, but I can't find one. I've stopped using Google and I've used this rival search engine, and this is a moment where you think, oh, Google will find that straight away, but I can't manage to find it. But it is really cool. It's this completely different interface where it just lays out components from your website, and as you fiddle with the styles, it just updates them all, and it's a really nice way of seeing all of, so H1, H2, H3, what images will look like, and so on. And you just click a button, and the whole site, it just demonstrates what all of those components would look like. And it's a really neat idea. And the implementation of it is really good. If any of you three can find an image of it, I'll shove it up there. But my new search engine has come up blank. Michelle, anything to throw in?
Nope, I think you've covered it.
Yeah. Okay. So, yep, go to either of those two articles. This is nice. This is a lovely piece, and I feel that this is the kind of stuff that warms the cockles of your heart. Equalize Digital raises pre-seed funding for expanding accessibility checker plugin development. So, Equalize Digital is run by Amber Hines, and I want to say her husband. Is that right? I forget.
Yep,
Thank
Chris.
you. Thank you. And so they're all about accessibility, and they have an accessibility checker plugin. And over the last period of time, they've been trying to develop it. And from this piece that I'm showing on the screen on the WP Tavern website, it sounds like that's been an interesting journey, but it's meant that they've been able to do a little bit of work on that and then get on with their profitable stuff, which allows them to pay for it and then go back. And then, they're just sort of flip-flopping between them. Well, talk about nice. An investment has been secured by them of an undisclosed amount, but it's from Joost de Volk of Joost fame and Marika van der Act of Joost fame. They have decided to invest in this to accelerate the production of it. It sounds like they're going to bring on some I don't know if it's full-time staff, but it certainly sounds like they're just going to concentrate on features to make everybody's accessibility experience a little bit easier. Some of the things they're hoping to drop in the near future is a visual UI where you can click on elements on your website. So it'll be a plugin. You'll install it, get it going, look at the website, and then click on components of the website, and then get useful information as to where your accessibility standards are not being met, or presumably patted on the back if you do well. And I just think this is really lovely. What a really nice story to report. I mean, accessibility seems to be a hot button topic in the last couple of years, but I imagine funding for this kind of stuff is pretty hard to find. So in step some very nice philanthropic individuals, Joost and Marika. So bravo. I'm going to hand this one over to you three.
Equalize has also been hiring lately too. So they've hired at least one position, and I think they have another one open right now. So this is probably helping to get this up and running and keep working on it. And I'm pretty excited about it. So many things that are labeled accessibility are things that are truly not accessible, like accessibility overlays and things like that. And so Amber is definitely a huge proponent of true accessibility and runs a meetup about accessibility, all those kinds of things, and does a lot of really good work. So this is really exciting to see that the things that she's working on and that they're working on as a company are able to move forward for the community.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if accessibility is your real given thing and you've poured a whole boatload of time into it, then you'll understand it inside out and perhaps won't need something like this. But WordPress powering 43% of the web, you've got to imagine quite a lot of those 43% of websites are built by people who they don't really do this for a living. There's quite a lot of just blogs, people getting their brochure website up. and having a little bit of a helping hand, especially in terms of compliance and legal responsibilities, which are getting more and more talked about. This kind of stuff is amazing. They mentioned that they want to at some point make this their full-time thing. And in order for that to happen, they need the feature set to be good so that it can be self-sustainable. And then presumably there'll be some revenue model for them on the other side. So anyway, Kristen or Rob, if you've got anything, go for it.
Yeah, we use this plugin. Sorry, Kristen, go ahead.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I was just going to point out there's a line from the article that I really appreciated, just talking about making accessibility just as important as SEO. And I think a lot of people would not put them on the same level as far as like importance when it comes to building or maintaining a website. So I thought that was really neat.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think the difference is that people see SEO as income generator and they see accessibility as an expense, right? So switching gears in a way that I think makes web accessibility equivalent to physical accessibility at like stores and stuff like that, I think is really where, I would like to see the psychology and the thinking of business owners go in the future, in the same sense that you're like, well, okay, if I'm going to have a store, that store needs to be wheelchair accessible. Maybe I need to put in a ramp or an elevator. Like these things are like no-brainers to us. But if you look back at like the 70s and 80s, when those first Americans with Disabilities Act laws were coming into effect in the United States, like that was not a given at that time. And there was that kind of like cranky complaining of like, oh, now I have to pay for this new thing that I have to add to my building, So I think we're seeing a similar thing happening with the web, and hopefully in 5 or 10 years it'll just be a no-brainer that like somebody who's visually impaired or can't use a mouse needs to be able to interact with my online store or needs to make a reservation at my restaurant, stuff like that. Right now, I don't think that the median business owner is thinking about that. We do have a lot of people among our client base who are getting more aware of it and willing to invest in it. And, frankly, I'm telling them like, listen, like we have clients coming to us with lawsuits in hand because they're not doing this in time. So you guys should really get ahead of this. Like it's not like a joke or an option anymore. Like the Department of Justice really is enforcing it. I think there were like 4,000 ADA related website lawsuits in 2022. And typically what's happening is people are settling them out of court and they are paying a settlement of like $5,000 or $10,000 sort of as a penalty to the plaintiff, who's a disabled person who tried to access their website but couldn't in some way. But then they're also in those settlements committing to fix the problem anyway. So if you're going to go pay the settlement and then pay the developers anyway, like you might as well get out ahead of it, not pay your lawyers extra, not pay the settlement, and also serve your customers better. So, it's definitely been a little bit of a volatile like process in the last few years, but in 2022, the Department of Justice actually came out and said like, yeah, this is a thing that we're going to enforce. Like we know the law was written in the 80s, but we believe that it applies to websites if you're a public business. So if you're just like, if you just have an office and you don't have a store that's open to the public, you're not quite as subject to the law. But if you have a physical space or you sell some sort of physical product, like you 100% are. So we've used Accessibility Checker plugin on our own sites. We have it on Master WP. It's great. It really complements a lot of the other tools that are out there, but it's also in your dashboard, which is unique. Like a lot of the other tools that we use are like Chrome extensions or like external checkers. So I would definitely recommend that people pop that free version on there. I think there's already a premium version. So I think that's one of the like revenue goals for the future. And honestly, there's a very passionate community around accessibility right now, but the challenge is getting that mainstreamed, right? And I think that is a tricky process because you don't want to mainstream it by just telling everybody they're going to get sued. That's kind of a very uncomfortable way to do it for a lot of people. I'm a little bit more aggressive with that with my clients because I'm like, listen, like I know this sounds like I'm telling you have to build more stuff, but like I'm actually advocating for you guys to not get in trouble in the next 5 years because otherwise it's going to happen, right? So the challenge is really like mainstream acceptance, but also just the fact that you do have to make trade-offs. Like one of the things that we see is that sites that were built 15 years ago are more accessible than sites that were built 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that, the basics are pretty accessible. But any sort of like what I would describe as like new fancy design, like you start to lose some of that ability to use a screen reader pretty quickly, right? So we actually are redoing one of our restaurant clients, and I built their site for them in 2010 or something like that. And we went back and looked at it, and we're like, you know what? Like, actually, like, you guys are not really having, like, you don't have huge ADA issues on this site because it's basically like tables, and basic fonts and stuff like that. So that was cool, but we're still rebuilding it for them to modernize it. But as we modernize it, we have to really be careful that we're also remaining ADA compliant. And, there's several other like acronyms and like sort of sets of guidelines that you have to follow to get to that point. But especially with restaurants, with hotels, anybody with a storefront, like it's past the point where you can write it off or mess around at this point.
It's interesting because there was a comparison there between SEO as a thing. Everybody sees the benefit to that because it directly, materially affects your bottom line. But the thing about the SEO is you are basically optimizing for Google. I mean, I know you could optimize for the other ones as well, but not really. You're going to go at Google. So there's one point of truth. There's one source. You figure it for Google. It's curious because you kept mentioning the ADA. Of course, the ADA means nothing to me because the jurisdictions throughout the world are going to be different. So this is going to be a real issue, isn't it? Which set of standards are the standards? Do people who adopt certain standards in, let's say, I don't know, France or Australia, what do they have to prioritize first? Where are the ambulance chasing lawyers going over there as opposed to in the US? What's the low-hanging fruit that they can fix which satisfies a bunch of requirements? And whilst there's guidance, and I imagine the ADA by default of just being the ADA will probably end up being the default. It is a curious thing that, in the UK, the law is definitely going to be different. So
there is one, they're not really an official authority, but everybody has sort of adopted their guidelines, and that's called WCAG, which is Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So that's actually what is included by reference in like Americans with Disabilities Act. And we also have something called Section 508, which applies to the federal government here in the States. So basically, if you look at WCAG 2.1 AA, like that's the thing that people are using. So I think that actually does apply internationally. However, the other thing that remains to be seen is like exactly how a judge would interpret some of these guidelines, right? Like, so they're not always like exactly cut and dried in the sense that like, oh, well, like some things are clearly wrong, right? And some sites are clearly unusable. But it'll be interesting to see if we ever get to a point where gray area is addressed in an actual court, because that could then sort of move the needle a little bit or tweak, move the goalposts, tweak the guidelines, whatever metaphor you want to use. But, right now, most of these are settling because basically people are saying like, yeah, like we know this, like this is new, like this, our site's not up to date. We acknowledge that. And we're going to, fix it and move on without, taking it to court. But I think there is a potential for kind of like what happened with GDPR and Google Fonts, like, a judge basically made up a new rule, right? Saying that you can't use Google Fonts, and I've kind of, lampooned that a little bit in our articles because I think it's a little bit over the top. But at the same time, there is that possibility that you might say, okay, well, I thought this type of menu structure was okay, but now there was a ruling about it and I have to go back and change that. So just being on top of it is a thing that I think all web developers and designers are going to have to make part of their job, at least for the next few years, as it kind of gets more, as they nail down the details a little bit more.
Look, the bundle theme in WordPress 6.2, Google Fonts included in the bundle theme. So
because it's illegal to reference other websites on your website now. I'm just like, this is just, I've written a couple articles about this, but
GDPR certainly,
I feel like
is
the whole point, like no CDNs are illegal in Germany.
Oh boy. We'll see. Yeah. So
we'll see how that
bit of
up.
Context. Justin Tadlock. My life is complete. He's made a comment on this show. For extra info, the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law in 1990. Thank you, Justin. That's great. If you're, okay, great point. Nomad skateboarding. If you use most of the popular themes and builders, the default bells and whistles are almost universally not compliant. Having proper text contrast fixes many of the issues. Looking at the white text overlay on photos. Yeah, okay. So let's hope that Amber's plugin with the kind sponsorship from Yoast and Marika, Emilia Capital, I believe it's called. Let's hope that brings this to fruition more quickly. Michelle, anything you wanted to add in there?
I've already said all I can.
In which case, yeah, but isn't that a nice topic? That's such a nice story to be featuring. That's really cool. Here's another nice thing. This is an event. This is the Web Agency Summit. It's happening next month. So really, we're just telling you, get your calendars out. Put this in the diary. It's a big WordPress event, 40 plus speakers. They say WordPress experts, disruptors, and thought leaders. It's all happening live between April the 25th and the 28th. The URL is atarim.io/summit. Once more, atarim.io/summit. And go and check this out. Michelle, I know that you're getting involved from actually, if I scroll to the very, very bottom, let me find it. There we go. Look, Post Status joins Atarim's Web Agency Summit. This is a nice collision of two different things. What's all this about?
Yeah, we're going to be staffing the networking lounge. So I've been reaching out to a lot of community people and getting them to sign up for an hour here or there to just kind of keep the conversation flowing and having some great conversations in the networking lounge throughout the event.
What's the what are the conversations that went on? Do you know, in terms of Post Status? Is it just a mutual backpacking sort of did I say that right? Backpatting, I think, is what I meant to say. Are you just sort of helping each other out? They'll help you, you'll help them, kind of thing. Yeah, nice. Nice.
Exactly. I've been working with Disha over there to get those things moving forward, and yeah, it's pretty exciting. And I think you actually committed to an hour, did you not?
I did, yeah. I have, and I said, Vito owes me big time. I'm looking forward to it.
I can be very persuasive, can't I?
You can be very persuasive. I think basically, Michelle, almost everybody in the WordPress community is in some way, shape, or form in your debt, and so
I don't know about that,
you know what I mean. You come along and ask me this question, it would be highly unreasonable for me to refuse. But yeah, I'll be there. I don't have any insight into what it is that I'll be doing just yet, but put it in your diary. 25th to the 28th, online event, 40 speakers, and atarim.io/summit. And look, there's Rob Cairns chiming in.
The call for speakers is still open too, by the way.
Say that again.
The call for speakers is still open. So if you're interested in speaking, you can apply to speak at that event.
Okay. And Rob Cairns says, me too. Oh, did you get on? Did you get him as well? Excellent. Oh, that's brilliant. Okie doke. Let's move along. Full site editing. Right. There's no way I can unpack this in the time that we've got provided here, but this is an article on WP Marmite. We featured them a couple of weeks ago. They had this interesting article about whether we should strip out the blog from a default WordPress install and have it as some kind of canonical plugin, which I thought was quite an interesting idea. This is a study that they've carried out, and they went around asking a bunch of theme shops, because that's obviously their thing, what their position was vis-a-vis a whole bunch of different things in terms of full site editing. I know it's called site editing. They know it's called site editing, but they said, we're just going to keep calling it full site editing because that's what everybody keeps calling it. And it's quite interesting. So they asked a bunch of questions. For example, like, are you endeavoring to build block-based themes? Have you got bespoke blocks going on? And a whole bunch of other things. And then they compared that data with the previous year and the year before that, or at least did in some cases. And it seems that there's this slow but inexorable rise in the adoption of full site editing across these theme house companies. And obviously, a lot of people go out there and they purchase commercial themes. I know that you can build them yourselves, but many people prefer to just spend a few dollars and have something out of the box. And it would seem that full site editing is becoming more and more a part of their theme offerings out there. Definitely, they're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But I just thought this was an interesting survey. I don't know if the three of you had a chance to sort of dig into the weeds a little bit. But in almost every single question that was asked, there was this just slow rise, a little bit of momentum towards full site editing, which I thought was curious because I don't really have any insight into the theming business. And yeah, it definitely looks like people are moving in that direction. So I'll pass it over to you if you've got anything you want to add.
Yeah, I'll say that first of all, I had to Google what Marmite was when you showed this.
It's not
first time,
good.
And I now realize it is like
not good, Rob.
It's like Vegemite, right? Because I've tried Vegemite in Australia.
It's the work of the devil. It's really.
I will leave that to you guys. Yeah. I feel like there's a funny trend of I feel like this is not the only website that's named after a in the WordPress industry. So there's something going on with that. But I think so. Two things jumped out at me. Number one is kind of what I touched on before, that Gutenberg's just gotten better, right? And I think that when you see people adopting it, it's because it's not a horrible experience anymore, like it was a few years ago, And I think that is really good and just reflects the improvement of the software. And people are okay, I kind of am starting to see the vision for this. I'm starting to see the benefits as opposed to just the drawbacks of something being super new and a little bit, less tested than maybe it could have been. The other thing that strikes me is that the question that actually I would like to ask the theme shop folks is site editing making theme creation irrelevant or less relevant or different in some more holistic way, right? Because site editing in some ways, basically replaces a lot of these out of the box themes, or at least a lot of the features, right? So I think that's definitely true of the true full page builders like Divi and Elementor. You kind of either need to use one or the other, but there's also a whole large group of in between themes where it's hey, you have my theme, you sort of need to also add these plugins which add site building features to the theme. And, there's a lot of those companies out there that basically were really valuable to users in 2015 or 2018 or whatever. But I'm not sure that those use cases even really still exist if site editing takes hold, because you'd want to build in a way that is more compatible with core for the future.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when we were talking about WordPress 6.2 and the updates there, and especially around the navigation block, I kind of feel that somebody could quite easily step in and make some major changes that were not major, just fiddle with that to give it a different experience. So a different way of creating that, but still leveraging that navigation block to do all the bits and pieces. It's just a bit funky at the minute, isn't it? It's not what we're used to, and so we're not quite there. But yeah, thank you for that, Rob. Michelle, anything from you or Kristen?
No, good.
You're all good. Yeah, go and check it out. It's WP Marmite, and what you'll definitely notice is that in all the cases of all the shops, and they analysed 123. So it's not a tiny survey. I imagine 123 represents a fair amount of the WP theme shop space. Some of the bigger ones, they went to Code Canyon. What's it called? Theme Forest, I believe, as well, and checked a few bits and pieces out there. But it seems there's a slow but inexorable rise. Okay, good to know. Right,
you're getting some negative feedback, Nathan, about your Marmite comment. So
yeah, okay. So this is Ross. Ross is in the UK. Ross, by the way, has the coolest Chrome extension ever called WP Turbo. Drop what you're doing and go and Google it right away. It's really great. He says he can't believe there's no other comment on Nathan's Marmite review. So here goes. You're wrong, Nathan. So wrong. Marmite is the best. Marmite's just not the best. No. Have you ever had it? Has any of you ever had something akin to Marmite? Okay, so it's a bit like putting. Imagine like you drain your car of oil, and then eat some of that. That's about the best. I'm so going to get sued by the Marmite company.
It sounds like a WordCamp Europe Marmite eating contest.
Yeah, there's going to be a Marmite
in the cards. Yeah,
see how many slices we go through. Yeah, clearly Ross is really into it. Sorry for offending your sensibilities. It's one of those few foods. It's always a bit of a joke in the UK because it's one of those things that you either love or you hate. There cannot be a middle ground. And so, for example, certain members of my family just crave it and love it, and just the smell of it drives me from the kitchen. Oh, I'm sorry, I got carried away there. Right, let's talk about something WordPress again. This is a podcast episode I did on the Tavern recently with Talisha Llewellyn, all about something called Certified WP. Okay, this is a whole interesting debate, and I'm really curious about Rob's take on this as well, especially given that the Master WP offer a whole bunch of courses. So Talisha is really trying to put together I won't say canonical, like it's the end of the world. This is the only variant, but her argument goes like this: with WordPress having 43% of the web, but there being no real way of certifying to employees that I can do these things in WordPress categorically. Look, I've got the badge, I've got the certificate, I sat the exam, I did the course, and I passed the test. Wouldn't that be a good idea to have? There isn't at the minute, but Certified WP is an initiative which I think she began it. That's my memory, at least, anyway. Hoping to gather this community of people together, figure out what these certifications might look like. What levels would there be? How high up can it go? How developer-y or how just implementer-y could we make those certifications? And she makes the case in this podcast, I thought, really strongly. She also has a thing called WP Connects or Connects WP. I'm sorry, I can't remember which way around that goes.
WP
Thank
Connects.
you so much, Michelle, in which she is this is the inspiration for it, really. She's trying to educate people who come out of the services in the US who are kind of looking for something to do with their lives after their service is over. And by all accounts, that is a real moment in time where, you've been busy doing your service and suddenly there's this cliff edge and you really don't know what to do with yourself. And so WordPress could be a real decent way of getting people into it. So she's been offering coaching and things like that. So the debate here is, should we have a certification thing? Should it be the certification thing or just one certification thing? And I know, Rob, you're interested in this. You've obviously got courses over on Master WP, but Michelle told me at the beginning, you're also, this project specifically, you're into this, right?
Yes, Michelle and I are actually both directors of the nonprofit that Talisha created for this purpose. So we just had a meeting, I guess a few weeks or a month ago, and it touches again on that governance of the nonprofit and stuff like that. So we did, all the elections and everything like that. So we're both, Michelle and I, involved closely with this.
So Michelle, what's your position on it then? Do you want it to be just one of many different offerings, or is the idea to make it almost, if you like, the offering?
I think there's no design to be have a corner on the market or anything like that. And certainly we're not trying to make sure that there's nobody else could ever do this again, but instead to create the best possible credentialing standards that we can. The WP Connects right now they're using SkillBridge, which is something that kind of a military thing that, when you are separating from the military to try to get you back into civilian life and find a job outside of the military. And for people who want to then continue to work for the military, but as civilians, they would need to have a credential to be able to work in WordPress. And there isn't one now. So the idea was first to create this credential specifically for people who want to go back to for the military as civilians. But then if we're going to do that, why not create it for the entire industry and not make it niche, because WordPress is WordPress. And so the idea
Michelle,
then...
Can I just ask you a quick question there? Is that because from the military side of things, the money the money to pay for that education piece has to be bound to an accreditation process. You can't just ask the military, give me X $1,000 and I will go and spend it on my furthering education. It needs to be, well, no, tell us what the thing is and we'll pay for it and you can then consume it.
So that's part of it, but it's more like they could get that they could become accountants and go work at another company, right? So they don't have to have the accreditation to go out and work in the industry, in the field. But if they want to go back to work for the military specifically, they have to show a credential in order to be able to be hired that way. And so this credential fills that purpose, but then also, as long as it's being created, why not make it available to the entire industry, so that if companies are hiring, especially companies that aren't WordPress companies, right, that don't have necessarily the ability to vet their applicants the same way that those of us within WordPress can do, this would be something that says, I've passed an exam, I've hit a certain level of credentialing that shows you I understand how to use WordPress to this level, that level, whether it's a user, developer, etc., to be able to have that as a standard.
So, Rob, being an employer, you obviously, it matters whether that credential actually is a reasonable document to hold. If you show up with, look, I've got this credential, and then it turns out that you go through 3 people and none of them can do what they claim to have done, it matters. So presumably it's got to be rigorous, the curriculum's got to be well thought out, it's the teaching's got to be well thought out, the examination, whatever that may be, needs to be proven. And then given all of that, is this the kind of thing that you would take as an employer? You would look at that document and say, okay, right, you're in the shortlist kind of thing.
Yeah, so a couple big picture thoughts. The first is that I really like the fact that this is pegged to something that the Department of Defense is going to accept, right? So I think that it kind of is an offshoot of Talicia's other projects, that this happens to be the way that she's approaching the credentialing. But, that is a standard that is kind of like clearly legit in my mind, right? If you're saying like, we have this credential, the, US government is accepting it, it would be weird if then like some random like WordPress agency was like, well, that standard's not good enough for me. So we really want to get it to a place where there is, I think, legitimacy to it, right? In addition to the direct effect of helping veterans transition back into, day-to-day civilian work, right? It also says, hey, this is a really high-end legit thing. So there's that component of it. The other thing that I really like about it, before I actually answer your question about how I would handle it, is that so we have this huge problem, which is, I guess, twofold. So first and foremost is that people who build software in other things that are not PHP and WordPress don't believe that WordPress developers are real developers. And we've done a lot of like articles and podcasting about this. So I think that this is something we see for almost everybody who's entry level, is they actually get discouraged from working with WordPress because people are like, it's old, it's busted, like it's boring, like it's not real coding, like you should go do React or whatever other, obviously React is coming into WordPress, but you should go do the cool JavaScript stuff instead. And we actually are losing a lot of younger people completely because of that, because they're actually being discouraged from even touching PHP or learning WordPress in any way. That is not a big deal right now. But, as like our hair gets grayer in the current like agency owner industry, right? We are going to have a problem, which is that we are significantly under resourced in like that, 20 to 30-year-old group, and significantly over resourced in that like 40 plus group, or however you want to like have that shake out. But there's a demographic issue in the sense that we want new, hungry young developers and designers to be coming into this space. That's an issue right now for a lot of reasons. One of which is that it's not viewed as legit or like interesting or innovative to work in the WordPress and PHP space. I think this would be a small step in the right direction for that. It's something that's very similar to like what we see, for example, with Amazon Web Services.
Yeah.
Like you can go to AWS, you can get one of several different certification levels. Microsoft has similar stuff for their, hardware and software. And basically, like, people who are out there doing like server tech and systems administration are going out and getting these certifications because they exist and they provide legitimacy in the industry. They're almost like, a prerequisite to work on AWS stuff in some ways. So to bring that into the other point that I was going to make is that right now we have this problem where people are getting turned off by WordPress because it's old-fashioned, or however you want to like phrase that. I think of it as tried and true, but it's definitely not the trendiest and most like exciting thing for a developer who maybe just got out of like college or just got out of a boot camp to go into. The other thing is that we simultaneously gatekeep people, and we say, oh, you can't come be a senior developer because you don't have enough WordPress experience yet. But we create this circular problem where you can't go get enough WordPress experience. So basically the way to get WordPress experience is to be a freelancer, right? But not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody has the ability or the desire to do that. So if you don't come into the like bigger company with the 5 years of like freelancing experience, you look like a novice, regardless of whether or not you are a novice. So to me, the certification would really help, especially with the entry level hiring, because it's like, okay, like here's a thing that you can go do to show that you are at least at like this like acceptable level. Like you didn't just pick up your first WordPress site yesterday. Like you have a real level of knowledge about it, and that can be done completely without anyone gatekeeping you, right? So you don't have to go get that first internship from, the person who may want to give it to one of their buddies instead, right? You don't have to freelance for years. It basically makes the industry more approachable by someone saying, hey, I just got out of a boot camp. I'm going to go get this WordPress certification. That's then going to get my foot in the door for 10 jobs instead of maybe one job, right? That I might have been able to get without anything on my resume. So I think it fills a gap, which is that it's really hard for a younger developer to build their WordPress resume unless they sort of get lucky and become a successful freelancer or get that first job in a somewhat random way. So I think it'll actually, in addition to helping, on the military veteran side, like it'll also increase diversity in a lot of other ways because it removes a gatekeeper, right? And it says like, okay, like you can't throw my resume away because I have the certification on here, like actually address this job application. And as we've seen, like there's just a lot of very flippant stuff out there. Like, if you don't capitalize the P, I'm going to throw away your job application and stuff like that. So the more we can get away from that, the better. And I think this gives entry-level developers a much more legitimate like piece or a much more legitimate thing on their resume. And you learn stuff too, right? So yeah, I mean, obviously I'm a fan of the idea. I know other companies out there are working on other certifications, for different pieces of the puzzle. I think that they all basically would solve the problems that I just described of, the difficulty of getting in to the industry and even knowing what the path would be to get in. Like if you went out and you asked a bunch of people who just graduated from a boot camp what they should do next, they'd be like, I don't know, I'm going to apply for a job at like 7 Silicon Valley companies and just say I know React, right? That's like the job path that's coming out of those boot camps right now. I would like to see them also be able to say, or I could go get my WordPress certification or both, right? And now it opens up more opportunities for everybody.
It's really interesting because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Once it's launched, if people take it seriously, then people take it more seriously, then people take it more seriously. The piece, the AWS piece, I don't know if Amazon fund any of that, and I don't know, for example, if Cisco fund their networking requirements. But I do wonder if the argument could be made that, let's say, Automatic may have some skin in the game here in terms of helping these. But I guess other people would say, well, why would they favor one certification over another? Another thing that occurs to me, though, as well, is that once you start on this, I'm going to call it a treadmill, you've really got to keep that treadmill going, because if we look back to WordPress, I don't know, 5.6, and think, what would the certification for that have looked like? Well, it's nothing like the certification for WordPress 6.2. I mean, literally, there's so much that has changed. So we'd have to have this continuous process of the certification itself is getting updated, and the one from 3 years ago probably doesn't carry the same clout as the one from last week, and so on. So it's a big undertaking.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about like other professionals, like a accountant, for example, like accountants have to do X number of hours of continuing education to keep up with new rules every year. So that's something that I think we are already de facto doing for agency employees. Like we're always training people, right? It would actually in some ways be easier for me as an agency owner if the training was guided more explicitly by a certification that I didn't have to personally do all the, like, you know what I mean? Because right now, like, we're literally like sitting around saying, how are we going to train people? Like we had that conversation last week, you know? And that's now an internal cost to me to both develop the training as well as have the team do the training. We do offset some of that cost through the Master WP workshops, because basically what we do is we train our staff and then we sell other people the training that we did for our staff anyway. Like that's what a lot of our workshops are. But this would, I think, defray costs even further and, you know, I think standardize things in a good way. So that you could say, okay, well, I know that now that I can jump between different jobs if I need to. I know that I like different WordPress companies, for example. I know that there is a meaningful standard. I also would slightly push back on the idea that 5.6 is totally different than 6.2. Like,
maybe I should have said
PHP and
3.6.
JavaScript still exist, you know? So, you know, you have to learn the new layers that are being layered on top. But, you know, ultimately, you know, you could, if you had time warped to today from 4 years ago, like you could still code for WordPress.
I guess my argument was
but
more
there is
about
a continuing
people coming through the door at the beginning of that funnel. So if somebody came in and wanted to start their base layer certification today, it would look very different from somebody beginning their certification a little bit of time ago. A really interesting initiative. I'll just point to the podcast again. If you want to hear Talisha talk about this, it's on the WP Tavern website. It's episode number 67. Kristen, did you want to add anything into that?
Not really. It's a really interesting idea. I definitely, in past experiences, we offered a training arm. People were always asking for some type of certification. I think it's just first establishing those best practices, the curriculum in the first place, and then where do you go from there? So the maintenance of it, like you said.
Yep. Courtney, who is very much involved in WordPress training, she says the training team also share these sentiments. It's great to see others filling needs such as the military vets and the interfacing with the US government. That'd be out of scope for training that she's involved in. This would also lend credibility to the boot camps, like where I instructed on the appropriate curriculum needed during boot camp learning time. And then nomad skateboarding. My former life was in sports medicine. Certification and continuing education was done yearly. It didn't mean a person was competent, but it did mean they weren't ignorant of all the subjects. Thank you. That's really interesting. There's a whole load of other Marmite-based comments, but it all boils down. Oh, yes. No, I should air this one because I misrepresented Ross's Chrome extension. I actually got the name wrong, so apologies. Where's it gone? There we go.
I think a Marmite podcast.
That's it.
That could be. I think that's going to be the big.
It's a controversial. We'd literally have to have the screen divided down the middle. It's Turbo Admin. Go and Google Turbo Admin. Add WordPress into that query, and you will find it, and you will be delighted that you did. It's truly great. Okay, quickly, another one by Rob. 2 cents. We have to have a practical component to certifications because we do not need people who have certs only on paper. Yeah, I guess on the entry level, it's about getting yourself through that door. Let's move on. Oh, how I love Mastodon. Oh, I'm going to write a poem about it. Ode to Mastodon. I really like it, and Automatic really like it, or at least they like the underlying protocol which supports Mastodon. We've talked about this before. Mastodon is really a skin sitting on top of ActivityPub. ActivityPub powers all sorts of different implementations. There are sites which are a bit a bit more, rather than writing comments like tweets, you post photos. That one's called Pixel Fed, and the logo's just there. But Automatic, we very quickly touched on this last week. Automatic acquired the ActivityPub plugin. Now, what that means is that they've taken on Matthias Pfefferi. I hope I haven't butchered your name, Matthias. And he is now going to be able to dedicate all of his time to making ActivityPub work with WordPress and making your WordPress website a first-class citizen inside of Mastodon. So imagine if people could somehow go to Twitter, and without you having shared anything, your posts would be there. And imagine if somebody wrote a reply and it came onto your website, and if you replied to that reply, it would go into Twitter. So this is starting to hot up for me. This is the promise of Mastodon. The fact that it's open and it's not gatekept by some billionaire, let's say that, by some billionaire. I just think this is really interesting. And the idea that Automatic, with their clout around WordPress and obviously developer chops, I think this is going to be really interesting. I, for one, I'm going to definitely go and play with this. I do like the idea that my website could become like a full-on account on Mastodon. I just find that really interesting. So it's just open to you. You know what I think? What do you think? Maybe I'm over-egging it.
Nathan, you actually run a Mastodon instance.
I do.
Right?
I do. Yeah. And
nice.
I did it. You know that time when you were into Nirvana, and then like suddenly everybody else found Nirvana like 2 years after you thought Nirvana was cool. It was a bit like that. I just got the idea that this whole Mastodon thing, there was no hint
you're ahead of the game.
Going to be popular, right? I just did it, and honestly, all you could find on Mastodon when I was using it back then was cat pictures. That, I swear, that's what.
That sounds
do you remember? Were you using it as well? But
no,
honestly,
no, I was new to it.
80% of the feed was cat pictures, and I have no idea. But it just seems to have been adopted by people who love sharing cat pictures. And it got a bit like, what the heck? And then
that's what my Instagram
then it just
like
exploded.
Too, that's what I
it just passed 10 million users yesterday.
Yeah.
The growth is steady away. The line goes like this, so it's not like 1 million a day, but it is on the order of, I think, 100,000 accounts a day. It is growing, nice. And it's open, and so clever little things like this can start to happen. And then who knows what clever little things somebody else will do in the future. Throw in things like web mentions as well, and it all starts to get very interesting. Yeah, sorry.
Well, especially if you think about how the Twitter API, I think, just went to like a paid service only. Like Twitter is very, very much closing itself for financial purposes. Like basically, they're treating it like it was a private equity acquisition, and they're going to now squeeze as much revenue out of it as they can. Whether that's successful or not, we'll see. I mean, to me, like the mission of Automatic and the mission of Mastodon seem extremely well aligned, and it would be interesting, to see more collaboration there going forward.
Yeah, what I don't think it is yet. Mastodon, I don't think is a particularly great tool for reach. So there are a few accounts that I've come across where because they've been famous elsewhere, and and they've obviously announced on their Twitter account, I'm going over to Mastodon, here it is. They managed to get this groundswell of support, and you get a few that are into the hundreds of thousands, but it's not. Yeah. It isn't that, and you can't algorithmically hope that your content will go to the top. So just because your post is shared, lots of times it doesn't mean that the algorithm suddenly thinks, actually, let's put more of that in, because that's obviously growing. It's viral. You won't get any of that, and so it will never be good for that kind of thing. But what it is it's a little bit more straightforward. If you don't follow somebody, you're never going to see what they put. If you want the algorithm to sort of bend your preferences, it's not going to do that, because it's simply chronological. And I think you're right, Rob. I think the juxtaposition here between Automatic's mission and ActivityPub, in this case Mastodon's mission, is really well aligned. But I don't think it'll become that broadcasting hub. I don't think it'll ever have that virality. So sorry, Michelle, I know I keep droning on about this, but
For me, I think Mastodon's great for conversation, etc. I don't see it as, at least at this point yet, as a huge marketing channel. So I
I
don't
think
think
you're
your
right.
brands.
Yeah.
So it's not going to replace Twitter as far as brand marketing and things like that goes. So
Yeah, you'd have to do a tremendous body of work to get to the point where your account had that. So my understanding of the Twitter algorithm is, like I just said, if you post something and then within seconds 100 people have suddenly shared it, there's some bit of the algorithm there going, whoa, stop what you're doing, post that all over the place. You will
engagement
never
gets
get that.
rewarded.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you will never get that on the current implement because it's open source. Who knows what algorithm somebody will come up with to make it exactly like that.
Well, I think that the point of Mastodon is actually to eliminate the algorithmic virality,
right.
right?
Right.
So that, in the sense that it's good for microblogging, like, Mastodon is just as good for me if I wanted to do very short, like tweet-like blog posts, right?
Mhm.
But from a company standpoint, what's the point of Twitter? Like, Twitter is an advertising platform if you're a company, right? Like, the goal of me putting a Master VP post on Twitter is that it gets so much engagement that then it gets engagement from people who have never heard of me before, and then now they've heard of me, and it's a function.
Right.
It functions as advertising, right? I don't even think it's really that good at that in most cases. Like, it's pretty rare that you get that kind of like win on Twitter. That being said, like, that is explicitly not the point of Mastodon. It's the opposite of the point of Mastodon. I think Mastodon is supposed to be calmer. There's supposed to be less like advertising and virality involved in it. So even though the interfaces are very similar, the goal is not really the same at all.
That's another nice thing about the fact that it's open source, is that the interface that they provide is just now one of many that you can use. There's a whole bunch of services where you can really modify the way it looks. So you can go for that TweetDeck approach where here's all the columns, or one that I prefer is called Elk. It's called elk.zone, and it's under constant development. It's browser based, so you don't install it anywhere, but you can have it as an app. You can click the thing in Chrome and make it into an app, and it's really nice, and it really does look a lot like Twitter. But yeah, it's nice. So, Kristen, you're new to this whole Mastodon thing that we're talking about. Do you use this? Is this even a thing? No,
not yet. I mean, I'll echo Michelle's point about it. Not sure yet, like what the marketing applications are yet. And I know like some things just aren't supposed to be that, right? So, but I think the news of this is very interesting and definitely gonna be following along. So,
yeah, it's such an obvious thing, right? Make your website a first citizen of the social side of things. So you can reply and follow my website. Just don't get me started. Courtney makes the point that Mastodon is where she goes to chat with devs and open source aficionados. Yeah, that's a really good point. There is a very strong WordPress community, and what you can do on Mastodon is, I guess you can do it Twitter. You just follow the hashtag WordPress, and lots of nice things coming through that on a daily basis. Anyway, there you go. Well done, Automatic. Bravo. I think that's cool. There we go. Now, here we go. AI. Every week, the conversation about AI. I am so sorry, Rob. I know you wanted to get into this, but time is running. You'll have to come back and talk to us. But
There will be many more AI conversations
that's right,
coming down the
I'm
pipeline.
slightly suspicious that Rob's real. It just seems to be. Not ChatGPT. GPT-4 has come out and taken the world by storm. I had quite a few bits and pieces that I wanted to say, but I'm just going to mention this one. ChatGPT has made coding easier. And there is this Twitter, which I will link in the show notes for today, where this chap on the screen, now you really can't see it, but he writes down in a book, like it's a piece of paper, basically. He writes down what he wants his website to be, and he photographs it, uploads his photograph to Discord. And don't get me wrong, it's not like a complicated thing. It's dead straightforward. It's a few buttons and a bit of text, but it parses his drawing, creates buttons with links with the text that he wanted to be on the buttons. And I'm just like, oh my lord, if this is what chat or GPT-4 can do, What can 5 and 6 do? And Rob, I've seen the slew of content that you're putting out over on Master WP, AI related stuff. I'm troubled, but I think you're more sanguine.
So I guess the first question I would ask is, are you troubled because you think that it's going to take over the world and like destroy humanity?
No,
or is there other
I'm
trouble?
troubled. I'm troubled because I don't think we've got the incentives right. And what I mean by that is I don't think it's a good outcome if an AI is able to eliminate a whole host of jobs unless we've prepared society for that disruption. You know, it's all very well saying, well, other jobs will come along. Yeah, but imagine the pain and anguish of tens of thousands of people whose job in accountancy, say, which can now, by all accounts, be done by GPT-4.
Yeah.
So it's the incentive piece. I don't worry about the use of it. I'm sure that it's not going to take over the world. I'm going to go and live on Mars anyway. So
Pretty sure, yeah. So I think, you know, I mean, I agree with you in a somewhat narrow sense that like you don't want an individual person to experience getting their job eliminated because of a computer doing it. I think what I would add to that is that if you look at even like even like our lifetimes, right? There was a time when spreadsheet software didn't exist. So there was a lot more need for manual like accounting. There were elaborate card systems that were used for these things that are now used that are just in software, right? Microsoft Excel essentially eliminated not only certain jobs and tasks, but also like the need for tons of paper storage and card storage and elaborate systems like that. Even if you think about when you were a kid at your school library and you had to learn the Dewey Decimal System and go through like the card drawers and stuff like that, like the kids don't have to do that now because they use databases on computers to do that instead, right? So it might still be like interesting to learn like that the 900s are biographies or whatever that, you know, system says, but like that is no longer really relevant. And if you look at it that way, like, yes, like there used to be jobs where people would hand copy books, right? And the printing press eliminated the need for most of those jobs. So I think one other example I would give that I actually, you know, have thought a lot about over the last 10 years is that, you know, in 2005, when I started doing like full-time professional web development after college, building an e-commerce site was really hard. It would probably cost, you know, $10,000 or $15,000 just to get a basic store up that would process credit cards securely and, you know, send you some products. Now that can be done with Stripe and Shopify by pretty much anyone in a matter of minutes, you know? So that did eliminate a source of income for me as a web developer. Like there's a lot of times now where I would have charged you, you know, $10,000 to do something that you could just do yourself on Shopify today. I don't feel like that has been like a huge, like that hasn't been a traumatic negative change for me. Like obviously there could be bigger changes and bigger issues around that, but like software getting better to me seems like a net positive, provided you know, it doesn't like turn into Skynet and take over the world in some evil way.
Yeah. We'll come back in 3 years. We'll be talking about Skynet. Honestly, I just find this whole thing really interesting, and it's the logarithmic curve of how quickly it's getting better that is a bit scary for me. And I do worry about our own industry and whether or not this will be able to code to a proficient standard such that, you know, there'll be lots of people looking around. You know, if you could get your web app built for $100 through Microsoft's OpenAI or spend $20,000 getting it done by a person, that's the incentive that bothers me a little bit. Okay. Michelle,
it's deflationary. Right? That's a good thing, right?
I don't know. I'm so conflicted about this whole thing. Kristen, Michelle, anything?
I've said a lot over the last few weeks about it. So
let's leave it to Kristen if she's got anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm one of the few writers that have been like super excited by this technology. I think it's really amazing, and it's been fun to like learn how to ask it questions and figure out like what it's going to say back. And I've used it a ton. I use it every day. So I think it's just, not really something that I've felt threatened by necessarily. I think it's something that's a tool that I'm able to like leverage to get better at what I do. So
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's
That's
good.
awesome.
I need the voice of reason. The pair of you have done a great job in calming me down a little bit. You've a cathartic feel to this whole episode towards the end. Right. Okay. We're going to move on because I definitely want to touch on a couple of things. Firstly, Jamie, I have mentioned your Twitter thread, so don't unsubscribe to all the things. I'm not going to say much more about it, but I am going to say that this is what ChatGPT gave me when I asked it about Catgate. Just be somewhat alarmed. Let's put those away quickly and say nothing else. But Jamie Marsland, you have been mentioned. The next thing I want to mention is this little beauty. Day one, I have it on my phone. It is an app which you use to journal. It's such a great idea. I love these kind of apps. But we did mention the other week that it's now gone all web-based. Previously, you either had to download the app on your phone or you had to download the app onto your computer. But now it is on the web. Being an Automatic-owned company, I think that was probably 24 months ago or something like that. It was acquired. But look at this little interface. Does that remind you of anything? That there be Gutenberg, I'm guessing. Kristen can tell us more. Is that right? Is this an implementation of Gutenberg?
Yeah, it's been really amazing to watch this coming from a WordPress background, seeing how Gutenberg is being used as an independent framework within the web app for day one. And so it's just been a really interesting and exciting implementation of it because, we really believe that the more Gutenberg is used even outside of WordPress, like the better it gets. And so it's been cool to see even, Tumblr using it for its editor and even a Drupal integration with Gutenberg, which I think is kind of interesting too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's like they've stripped out all the cruft that you don't need. And it's, just like here's some headings, here's some italicization and bolding and all of that kind of stuff. But it's a really, really nice app. If you are searching around for this kind of stuff, or indeed if you're looking for an excuse to do journaling, Kristen's actually got a post here. Just highlight the main points of this post. You've got this gratitude journal, 100 ideas, tips and techniques.
Yeah, so gratitude journaling is just a really great way to get started journaling if you're kind of new to the practice or maybe feeling like really overwhelmed by, I don't want to write about my emotions or thoughts or feelings, but gratitude journaling is just like a really easy way every day to just think about what you're grateful for and jot down a few things. And so this post is really, designed to help you kind of get started, get your feet wet with gratitude journaling, and maybe even inspired to start it. So.
It is a really, really genuinely nice app. I feel that if you're on the iOS Mac ecosystem, particularly, the implementation over there is really good. I'm still waiting for the sort of Android equivalent to catch up.
We are working on it.
I was going to say I got it from the horse's mouth. I'm going to hold you to that. It's a really, really nice app. So, but now, importantly to me, I don't need an app anywhere. It's just available on the web and in that lovely familiar interface. Actually, it kind of looks Gutenbergy, but it's kind of been tweaked just that little bit so that you maybe wouldn't necessarily know. It's not like Gutenberg's following around the internet.
Yeah, and we just pushed out some exciting updates even last week. Calendar view, where you're able to view entries in the calendar,
nice.
And then
missed that.
Really, like people were asking for that. And then tagging, there's some really cool tagging functionality for your journal entries. And so we're working on it. It's in beta right now, but it's still ready. You can use it, test it out.
And also, if you can persuade people to get on the web version, you just do one thing, just the one thing. You have to update the Mac app and all of that kind of stuff. Everybody's using the web. Use the web. Okay, and very finally, tacos. I'm afraid we're going to have to miss them out, Michelle. We're not going to talk about Samsung's Moon or how...
That's okay.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But we will end with this one. This is something that Rob dropped in. He wanted to mention. It's a plugin which their team have been developing. We were talking earlier about getting things right in terms of accessibility. Alt tags on your images. Bit of a chore, aren't they, from time to time? But we've got AI mixed with WordPress here. It's the perfect way to end. What does this do, Rob?
So what we did was we built basically a new and we think better image recognition AI specifically for this purpose of populating your alt text, right? So you can see some of the example images here. If you upload your image to every alt, either via the website here or the plugin. You might get an example like 2 people sit on a bench, or the stars twinkle in the night sky above a field of trees, right? So the idea is that the vast majority of the time, it's going to give you accurate alt text that you can just basically take to the bank and use right away. The way we see people using it is twofold. Number one, they don't have to stare at a blank space, right? That's one of the biggest challenges, is like, it doesn't seem like, hey, add a little alt text to your image is a big deal. But when you're composing something and you're staring at that blank field, and that blank field is also often like kind of even hidden in the interface in some situations. Even if you need to tweak a couple words, it's a really, really nice prompt and start to remember that alt text. And then the other thing that the plugin can do is, if you have a site, like we're literally doing an ADA remediation this week for a client, and we're going to go through and add alt text to every single image that doesn't have it with this tool in like 2 seconds, right? So it goes back through, and then you'll see a history, like a board of all the things that it did, and you can just tweak them, a word or two at a time. It auto saves the changes that you make. So basically, it's your assistant in the sense that you don't have to type all that stuff. It's going to get it, 80 or 90% of the way there for you. Maybe it's going to do 300 images in 3 seconds. And then you can go through and edit that, but you're not racking your brain to do all that alt text work. So it's free. You can create an account, get a bunch of image credits for free. If you want to do a, bigger batch, you can buy additional image credits. And we have version 0.1 of the plugin here. We actually have 2 coming out later today. So we added a couple new features. We moved some stuff around, and we're going to get it submitted to the directory probably later this week. It also has its own API, so you don't have to use the plugin. You can hook up to the API and put it in and build it into your own app wherever you want. We have a Zapier integration and all sorts of other cool stuff. So check it out. We basically took a bunch of image recognition tools and a bunch of language tools and baked them together with kind of our own recipe to get this specific use case of I really want to know what this photo is, and I want to describe it succinctly in 1 sentence in a way that somebody using a screen reader could truly get value from it.
If you're doing the ADA backport, if you know what I mean, where you've got the 10,000 image website and you need to do that work quickly, how presumably, well, I say presumably, how do you interact with those 10,000? Is there a list view of all of those, or do I have to individually go into the media library and click on each one at a time? Or
so you can individually click on them. And then the other thing you can do is run a bulk optimization, a bulk generation, right? So if you've ever used one of the image optimization tools, it's kind of like that, where you go back through. And pricing is $10 per 1,000 images max. I see that in the chat. So the first 100 are free if you sign up today, and then basically it's 1 cent per image going forward. So if you wanted to use it for clients, it makes a lot of sense. Doing a client site with 1,000 images for $10 instantly is a pretty easy thing for an agency to afford. And it's not a subscription. You just buy what you need. And you get an API key. You could plug that into unlimited WordPress sites.
You've only gone and proven that AI is quite useful, haven't you? I don't.
Well, see, that's the thing. I want to move it away from toys. That's what I like about the accessibility approach. Because I'm okay, well, AI is weird and creepy, right? If you're using it to generate photos of cats in gates and whatever the heck you guys were doing earlier, right? But that is, if you think about okay, well, what is a problem that I can solve with the fact that these tools can see objects and images, and then they can create really interesting language output from it. So what we've done is we've said, okay, let's use this image recognition technology that's mostly used for boring stuff like CAPTCHAs and stuff like that, and let's actually apply it to something we want to change to make the future better, right? So this is not necessarily creating absolutely perfect content, but it's making this accessibility work a lot faster and easier. So it's a way to leverage these tools for something that's actually
good. You've got a few nice comments. Obviously, people dropping off this and just going to check out the plugin.
Yeah, and I'll address Max's last question real quick. In that, yes, the data that we generate is stored in your WordPress database if you use the plugin. So what's going to happen is you do it once, it's going to store it in the alt text field for that media library
Where
item.
you'd expect it.
And you can also set it up so that anytime I upload a new image, it's going to, as it's uploading that image, it's going to ping the Every Alt API. It's going to populate the alt text. So even if you just drag and drop an image into the block editor, it's going to automatically have your starter alt text built in there.
So, as you might expect, it's called Every Alt. They managed to get everyalt.com, which is rather handy. Everyalt.com, nice and easy to remember. No weird spaces, just Every Alt.
Yep.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. And I'm somewhat annoyed that AI is actually useful. I want it to be relentlessly bad. then I can justify my sort of reluctance to adopt it all. Okay, I'm so sorry. We've overrun. We've gone for 1 hour 40 instead of 1 hour 30. I'm really sorry about that. I do apologize. But I would like to sincerely thank anybody who made a comment. They were really valuable. They keep the show going. That's great. Also like to thank Kristen for joining us. I really hope you come back. Michelle, I'm trusting that you'll come back. And Rob, maybe we'll have Rob on again as well. And by that point, I shall be a robot. And we'll see how it goes. Just before we end, the slightly humiliating thing that we always do at the end of every show. This is how the album art is made. And we all put our hands up. And yes, look, everybody's so willing straight away. That's so good. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week. Take care. Thanks a lot.